Hello, hello. Hope everybody's doing good. Um, it seems to me I'm trying to explain the table of nations to people, and people are not quite getting it. And the thing is that every ancient civilization is actually the direct descendants or the descendants of what is called the Table of Nations, or the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. So there is no ancient civilization that is not descended from Noah. A lot of people have a hard time understanding it. Now we have the DNA of the descendants of everyone. Hello, Christian Carpenter. Good morning. We have the DNA of the descendants of the ancient Table of Nations. So we can actually identify by way of DNA through the paternal haplogroup and the maternal haplogroups. We can identify who is the descendant of which nation, which ancient nation. For example, if you're an R1A, you're a descendant of Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, the son of Japheth, the son of Noah. That's majority of Europeans. So, because these are the nations, when the Bible speaks of the nations, it's basically referring to the Japhethite nations, the European nation or the Eurasian nations, you know, Gog, Magog, Meshach, Tubal, Tiraz, Javan, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. These are the so-called nations. But the point that I would like to make in this video is that there is no, hello, Antonio, there is no DNA from any other ancestor other than that of the ancient nations, which are the descendants of Noah. In other words, there's no DNA evidence of anyone not descended from Noah or not coming from Noah. Even the Neanderthal and the Denisovans, of course, are related to us distantly because the Neanderthals are Japhethites that had a lost lineages, had lost, went extinct. But they're Japhethite because the ones more closely related to Neanderthals are the Eurasians. The Africans and the Semitic populations don't have as much genetic information from Neanderthals because they're more distantly related. Now, the Denisovan is a mix of Hamitic and Japhethite DNA. So the Africans are related to Denisovans more so than the Semitic people. But even though they're not related to the Neanderthals, they are related to the Denisovans because the Denisovans are a mix of Hamitic and Japhethite ancestry. And so that means that the Semitic people don't have the Denisovan DNA. And the Semitic people don't have the Japhethite DNA. So when you look at a map of Denisovan populations and the Neanderthal populations, the two extinct or apparently extinct populations, what is highlighted is the areas where the Semitic populations are. So in other words, when you look at a map of the Neanderthal uh, population or people that have Neanderthal DNA today, it'll show up as Europe and Asia. When you look at people with Denisovan DNA, it'll show up as African and Eurasian people have Denisovan DNA because the Eurasians have the Neanderthal or the Japethite DNA, and the Africans have the Denisovan mix of the DNA, have a mix of the Denisovan DNA. So all the areas where there are Semitic people, it shows up less Neanderthal DNA and less Denisovan DNA. So you can basically see where the Semitic populations are and exactly where the Semitic populations are historically. In other words, of course, the Arabian Peninsula is highly Semitic, so there's less Denisovan and Neanderthal DNA there. But even as you go up through Europe, up through the Rhine River, all up into Scandinavia, you can see that it's less Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA. I mean, I covered it once in the map, but the point being is that the Neanderthals are Japethite, and the Denisovans are a mix of African or Hamitic, not even African, but Hamitic and Japethite DNA. So, but the point being, there is nobody living today that is descended from somebody other than the Table of Nations, which are the descendants, the grandsons, the great grandsons of Noah. And a lot of people, especially the skeptics, don't see the significance of this. It means we all stepped off the ark, our ancestors stepped off the ark. We're all descendants of those who stepped off the ark, which means the flood narrative is true. Of course, we know that because of geology and history and genealogies, and now DNA is showing that we are all the ancestors, the people that stepped off the ark. We are the descendants of the Table of Nations, which is outlined in the Bible because the Bible precedes the Table of Nations. I mean, precedes the nations. The records in the Bible precede that of the Sumerian records, the Egyptian records, the Chinese records, all of them, because it outlines and defines the Table of Nations and gives us their names. We have the names of our ancestors that we're related to. For example, if you're an American Indian or something, you might have a Q or a CY chromosome. That's either you relate descended from Madai or Nimrod. The Europeans, of course, Southern Europeans, let's say, have the R1b. They're descendants directly of Riphath, the son of Gomer, the son of Japheth, son of Noah. And of course, Semitics are the Aramean, Assyrians, Lydians, Elamites, and descendants of Arpachshad or Arphaxad, which is the Abrahamic and Judaic and Davidic descendants. And, I mean, it's as clear as day. There is no other ancestry. There is no other historical records. There are no other historical records other than the people that are descended from the tables of nations. Because the QY chromosome came from the Middle East. That's in America. The CY chromosome came from Mesopotamia, where Nimrod was. That's in America. Plus, America has other Mediterranean DNA as well. As a matter of fact, I saw on YouTube an American indigenous person, totally indigenous. He took a DNA test and it came back Mediterranean. And people are scratching their head. Why are American Indians or indigenous people coming back as Mediterranean? because in the days of King Solomon, the the BY chromosome, the EY chromosome, the TY chromosome, the R1BY chromosome, the I1Y chromosome, the I2Y chromosome, the J1, the J2 are all represented in America. They're all in the indigenous populations in America because the I1 and the I2 are there because that was Israel before, in the days of King Solomon, before Israel split off from Judah, and Israel went up in the Rhine River up into Germany, into Scandinavia, and into the Slavic areas. Um, and it's not a mystery because all we have to do is take a DNA test, and a Y chromosome test will show if you have an I2, an I1, or a J2 or a J1, and it proves, you know, absolutely your ancestry as to which one of the table of nations that you're descended from. Of course, the Hamitic population is the same. There's the DY chromosome of the Andamanese, which is, brother. They say sister, but brother to the C population. So we have the C paternal Y chromosome all all through Asia, south to Australia, east to the Pacific, north all the way to America. And then you have the DY chromosome from the Andamanese that goes up along from the sea, from the Indian Ocean of the Andamanese, all the way up to the Tibetans, all the way through Asia, all the way to Japan. And the Japanese originally were the descendants of the DY chromosome, which is brother, or they say sister, to the CY chromosome, even though it's a paternal Y chromosome. I don't know why they say sister, but anyway. But, anyways, and it was the OY chromosome, made their way into Japan and pushed the DY chromosome up north. So that's where the majority of the DY chromosome population is, with the beards and the curly hair and stuff, and the distinctive features of more of the Hamitic population. That's their descendants of the DY chromosome in Japan, and of course not straight hair. They have beards, and you know definitely different genetic makeup. From the regular OY chromosome and the QY chromosome, and generally the Asian Y chromosome. But anyways, that's about it, I guess. It's just the importance of understanding that there is no nobody living on Earth today. Nobody is a descendant of anybody other than Noah and his grandsons and great grandsons, which are the table of nations, which are outlined in the Bible, which is very significant, and it just goes right past people. People just don't see the significance of it. But you know anybody and everybody, they're all outlined there. They're all there. You're either North African, an Egyptian, a Cushite, or descendants of Nimrod, or descendants of Madai. The Greeks are Javan and Tiraz. Then there's Gog, Magog, Meshech, and Tubal, which is Magog, Meshech, and Tubal. The NY chromosome of Meshech, the OY chromosome of Magog, which is all through Asia, all the way up into Japan, Korea, everywhere, as well as even South Asian and places. It went north. Meshach went north. Tubal is, I believe, the KY chromosome, which is also the M and the S, which is they're not. I mean, they're separate lines genetically, but they're close in proximity to each other, which is the K, the M, and the S. They're all close in proximity to each other. So I believe they're the same actual descendants of Tubal, even though they split off, going way back. Of course, you have this thing of genetic distance too, because genetic distance, just because you have a long genetic distance or a huge genetic distance, it's all in the same amount of time as everyone else. It's just that there are more generations, and therefore more mutation, therefore it's a greater genetic distance. But it's not an indication of a greater age or a more original genome or ancestry. It's just that it's there's more mutations in the line, and that's not an indication of age as opposed to anybody else's genetic distance. It's just a matter of faster reproduction rate and more genetic mutations. So that's what the K and the M and the S are, because they go all the way back to the origin, to the beginning, but they have them as separate lines, but they're actually probably from the same, you know, ancestor Tubal. And the Q is Madai because that was the Medes, which is in the Middle East, which, moved, conquered the Middle East, Mesopotamia, the Medes and the Persians. That was the descendants of Madai. And that QY chromosome is the Y chromosome that's predominant in the Americas and the indigenous populations, along with the CY chromosome, of course, which is represented in the Olmec statues, the oldest civilization in Americas, the Olmecs, which have, typical like Pacific Islander features. And the Pacific Islanders are also descendants of Nimrod too, which is a mixture of Asian and Hamitic ancestry. So it's not exactly African, but it is Hamitic, and it is typical of the Pacific Islanders and the Olmecs. Very very similar because they're both, even though one is C2 and the Pacific Islanders are C2 and the American population is C3, so they're separate lines, but they're both descendants of Nimrod. So they have comparable features, that are like Pacific Islander, Olmec type features, which are similar to African features, as well. Only not exactly the same because it's a mixture of Asian and Hamitic feature as well. Besides, every every line is different, anyways. People don't look exactly the same, anyways. So it's not really an African lineage because they never went to Africa. They went east instead of west. Same thing with the DY chromosome. They went east. They're not even. They're totally removed from Africa, the DY chromosome, except until more recent times, or maybe a few came back to Africa or went to Africa. But the majority of the population is totally removed from Africa. Same with the CY chromosome, which is the descendants of Nimrod, which is from the house of Nimrod after Nimrod was killed. And it was a huge population, and it just kept on dispersing east, north, south, all the way to Australia. Australia, this is a C4, and there's a C5 somewhere in India, and there's the C2 is in the Pacific Islands, and the C3 is in the Americas. All descendants of Nimrod, direct descendants of Nimrod. who is descendant, who is the son of Cush. Cush is the father of the dark Africans, the dark-skinned Africans, as indicated by the Bible description of the African, of the Cushite that, or the Ethiopian Cushite that can't change the color of his skin. So they're identified in the Bible early on, and they, because the variations occurred early on, and then they fixed their genetic uh, changes, or their genetic variations became fixed in their populations as they separated and isolated from other populations. So that's why we have the different features of the different people, because they're all different lineages, different brothers in different places in isolation from each other. So that's about it. And there is no DNA from anyone anywhere who is not descended directly from Noah, who and the sons of Noah, the three sons of Noah who stepped off the ark. So that's about it. God bless everybody. Take care and have a great weekend. And of course, stay close to God's word and the truth, because people have these narratives of you know hundreds of millions of years, whatever, millions of years or thousands of years, whatever, and it's made up. It's not. They don't have calendars. They don't have genealogies. They don't have DNA evidence. They don't have anything. It's just made up. This supposed linkage to animals or whatever that humans came from animals. It's all made up. They don't have any evidence. It's just a story they made up in their mind, and they don't have history to back it up, or calendars or anything, because all the evidence is on our side. And these educators, these academics, are uneducated, miseducated, totally deluded, and they just teach people nonsense. It's just amazing how much nonsense they teach, and then their students come along and say they think that we're the ones that are uneducated, when we have all the evidence of all the historical records and genealogies and everything, DNA on our side. And it's these academics that think they know more than God that are making up stories, or they have made up stories that they're teaching people. That's why the educational system is so bad. That's why people are so miseducated and uneducated, because these academics think they know more than God, are teaching nonsense, made up history, just made up stories. They just made it up because they didn't want to believe, you know, the evidence that we have of a creator. And no matter which direction they go, if they go into physics, you're staring your face right at the creator. If you go into biology, you're staring right at the creator. No matter what field, geology, you're staring evidence of the creator right there in front of you. And they just deny, deny, deny. Everywhere they go and infiltrate educational systems and deny everything and make up stories. That's all they do. And I've seen this going on, 50 years now. People making up stories, and they're always being disproved. They make a claim, it's always disproved. But in the meantime, they just mislead people, and people still teach their claims, even though they've been disproved, because that's all they have. They don't have anything else. So they're still teaching, Haeckel's embryos and stuff like that, and gill slits, and stuff like that, because they don't have any evidence. They don't have any real evidence. But it's just a shame. And these academics that think they know more than God need to be corrected, called out, put to shame, that they're not being responsible with the facts. They're not being honest with the evidence, and they're misleading everybody, the whole world. And of course, the world doesn't want to believe the truth anyway, so they'll fall for it. They'll fall for that before they believe the evidence of the Bible or the truth, because of course they're misled and miseducated, and they mislead other people. They mislead each other. They set their clocks by each other's time. So they're all wrong. Anyways, it's about enough for this rant, I guess. We have all the evidence, the DNA evidence of the Table of Nations. It's all in our hands and our fingertips, and we need to use it against these academics that think they know more than God. So God bless everybody. Take care and have a great weekend. Take care.